All right, everyone, hello. Welcome to my channel. This channel is focused on educational matters, and we generally look at theories of everything. Uh, Try to give a deep dive on major theories of everything that I've studied in my life, but done so primarily alone because these are pretty obscure things that most people have not heard of. And even if they have, you have to put in a halfway decent amount of dedication to get them. You know, um, you won't really benefit from this study unless you have a little bit of motivation to, dig deeper. And today is video number 283 that we have done on the reciprocal system of theory from Dewey B. Larson. And Mr. Larson was an engineer in the 20th century. I was born in North Dakota, moved out to go to college in Oregon, and stayed out there in the Portland area. And about 1930, had some epiphanies that he took to heart and studied up and did a lot of experimentation, especially with, kind of crunching numbers, and eventually arrived at his two fundamental postulates in the late 1950s. And from there, deduced an entire theoretical universe that he wrote about in many books and articles that he wrote up until his death in 1990. The basic idea of the reciprocal system is that Mr. Larson is positing a universe made entirely out of motion. Not matter, not energy, but motion. And for Larson, motion was the relationship between space and time. Now, when you think about a universe of motion, what you have to be able to accept is you have to be able to accept the presence of motion without anything moving. Motion actually precedes anything that's moving. And motion is actually the thing that's moving. So whatever thing that you have that's moving is also made out of motion when eventually you get that. But to start with, you just have motion. And the kind of motion that Larson is discussing is basically a background motion, is motion in all directions outward at the speed of light. Larson refers to this as the progression of the natural reference system. So Larson is relying on this motion in all directions at the speed of light as the background motion, or the 0 point. So most scientists are going to be using a 0 point to make their measurements. Larson is measuring from an already existing motion outward at the speed of light in all directions. Now, he gets to this through his mainly his first fundamental postulate, the basic idea of the universe made out of motion. Motion is the relationship between space and time, and there are really three stipulations to that. We have a reciprocal relationship. That's basically a fraction or a ratio, and it's a multiplicative relationship instead of an additive relationship. And motion is basically a fraction with time or space as the numerator and space or time as the denominator. So the simplest example is speed. The bicycle is moving 15 miles per hour. 15 miles of space in 1 hour of time. Space over time. That is speed. Speed is a kind of motion. Motion is a relationship between space and time. Space over time is speed. But that can also be permutated, or you can use many different varieties of space and time there, because both space and time have their coordinate aspects, meaning that they come in three or more dimensions. Now we can grok that in terms of space. We normally think of space as being at least three-dimensional, but we don't normally think of time as being at least three-dimensional. But in a reciprocal system, anything that adheres to space also adheres to time. They are the same. They're the same thing. They're mirror images of one another. And so we have both coordinate space and coordinate time. And then the second stipulation is that we have what Larson calls clock space and clock time. And clock time is something that we're accustomed to. This is the motion of the clock. And Larson calls that a scalar motion. It's a motion that has a magnitude, but it has no particular specific direction. The clock is always getting later and later and later and later, but in no particular direction. And we're accustomed to that idea. What we're not accustomed to so much is the idea of the clock space. And clock space is the idea that space is always getting farther and farther and farther apart. And you can envision this using a balloon with dots on it. You blow up the balloon and all of the dots are moving away from each other. That is a scalar motion outward, a progression of space, or the flow of space. If you want to use the inner dimension there of that three dimensions as well, you can use something like raisin bread, where you put the bread in the oven. All of the raisins, when it rises, all of the raisins are going to be moving away from each other. And this was also detected by the Hubble telescope, which observed that all of the distant galaxies are moving away from each other. So that is the flow of space, or clock space. And then we also have the discrete unit postulate as a third stipulation. Both space and time come only in discrete units. You have to have a full unit of space or time before you have anything. Okay, if you don't have a full unit, you have nothing. You got to have a full unit. And then if you're going to the next unit, you have to have two full units, or you still only have one. So these units are very small, but they do exist, and so they only come in chunks. Space and time come in chunks. And if you have exactly one unit of space in 1 unit of time, you have the speed of light. That's what Larson calls unit speed. So that progression of the natural reference system is at unit speed in all directions, outward. Now, this sets up kind of a dichotomy where this progression of the natural reference system, or unit speed outward, is the null point, or the neutral point, or the reference point of this universe, the ether even of the universe. And there is half of the universe that is actually moving faster than the speed of light, which is totally disavowed by legacy science, and especially in Larson's time. and then half of, and Larson calls that the cosmic sector, and then you have half of the universe that's moving slower than the speed of light, the material sector, where we're comfortable, where we generally make our measurements and observations, and so does legacy science. And that material sector is characterized by coordinate space, 3 dimensions of space, and clock time, progressing time. But the cosmic sector is characterized by coordinate time and clock space. So you can see the reciprocal relationship there. You can also see the ability to extrapolate. So what is going on in the cosmic sector is exactly the same as what's going on in the material sector. So even though we know nothing about the cosmic sector, we can extrapolate to understand how the cosmic sector works by recognizing that what goes on there is the same as what's going on in the material sector, except that you have to invert the roles of space and time. So what's going on in space is what's going on in time in the cosmic sector. And what's going on in time in the material sector is what's going on in space in the cosmic sector. Okay, so that's Larson's first postulate, and that's where he arrived at his major contributions, and that for him to deduce a theoretical universe and then begin writing books, in particular on chemistry and physics and astronomy, but also on many metaphysical subjects, and also even on economics. We have covered, or we will be covering all of those topics on this channel. Now, after Larson's death, we had the emergence of Dr. Bruce Perret, who was not a student of Larson's, but a student of Larson's books and his articles and his talks. And there was a small group of followers of Larson's, which also included Dr. KVK Nehru, who teamed up with Bruce, and they eventually came up with what they called RS2, the reevaluation of the reciprocal system, which is just kind of like working out some of the kinks of Larson's system. And Dr. Perret did, both of them have done Herculean work, putting together a lot of different articles and a lot of different fora on the interwebs. And Perret would write sometimes under the name Daniel Phoenix 3, which was where he would put his most speculative work, that he would bring in a lot of his other interests as well. But these papers are all based on the reciprocal system. And these are called the Daniel Papers. And we're looking at one of those papers right now with the provocative title of Geoengineering, Chemtrails, HARP, World Orders, Timelines, and Ascension. And this is the 5th episode of this this channel going over this paper. So if you have not, if you would like, you should probably go back and watch the first 4 episodes to just catch up. But hopefully you can also grab hold right here and maybe get something out of it here. Okay, I'm going to go back a paragraph because the last episode, I think the video was cut off because the phone started overheating. So we'll start right here. As to the question of global warming, yes, the planet is heating up. However, due to the global dimming created by the chemtrail project, that heating up actually turned to a bit of cooling for a short time, causing conspiracy theorists to say the whole global warming thing was a farce. But if you have actually been outside lately, it is obvious that the sun is significantly brighter than it used to be, particularly at higher elevations. And the chemtrail sunscreen is failing, though they constantly double efforts to reinforce it. The experts are well aware of the sun becoming brighter and hotter, but you can't get the sun to pay carbon taxes for causing global warming. But if man is the source of global warming, then you've got yourself one major cash cow with carbon taxes, environmental research, cleanup, breathing taxes, drinking taxes, waste reclamation taxes. To paraphrase Carl Sagan, billions and billions of bucks. The initial geoengineering work was to block the solar changes and was just a temporary solution until the solar transition completed. But, like good humanitarians, the globalists saw a different picture. What if they destroyed the natural cycle and introduced an artificial one? One that they were the sole supplier for. And the only way you could survive was to pay through the nose. Okay, so this next section is called Geoengineering and GMOs. The globalists have always profited on the pain and suffering of others, and this is no exception. They did not bother to put much research into the side effects of dumping millions of pounds of these elements in the atmosphere. They only considered the immediate need to protect from the solar transition and figured they could take care of the side effects later on. But here was a major opportunity in the form of disasters, pain, and suffering. A couple of the major side effects were drought and superstorms. One cannot up the seesaw without having, one cannot tip the seesaw without having extremes. Drought occurs in the areas that are being heavily seeded, as these nanoparticles in the upper atmosphere form condensation nuclei for rain. But there are so many nuclei, they never condense sufficient water on them to get heavy enough to fall out of the sky, at least not right away. They just stay up there as water vapor, drifting with the air currents, creating drought conditions below. Given enough exposure to moisture over time, they will condense sufficiently to form rain. Due to the significantly higher volume of nuclei, they will have a much higher rain density than a natural storm. So when it rains, it pours. The superstorm. This creates an unnatural dichotomy. Upwind, you will leave drought behind. You will have drought. Downwind, you will have excessive rain. Also, nanoparticle vapor could be knocked out of the sky with an application of radio frequency energy to shake up things a bit and cause condensation and rain. Thermal vibration causes collisions, and collisions have the tendency to merge particles. Experiments along this nature have been conducted by Arco-Power Technologies over the years for weather modification that resulted in HARP, which had all the tools to do this. These metals in the upper atmosphere made it incredibly simple to control the weather, planet-wise. If you control the weather, you control the world. Controlling the world through weather has its own side effects, particularly since it tends to poison all life on the planet. In order to keep things going and under their control, the genetic makeup of life had to be altered to be tolerant to the new planetary climate, particularly aluminum and barium. Natural strontium is actually beneficial. It makes better bones than calcium. One of the things that must be kept in mind is that this started in the 1950s. It has been in progress for some time, and if you think all those cattle mutilations were done by ETs with anal probes, think again. Cows have blood and organs that are compatible with Homo sapiens, great for genetic experimentation. Once the basics were worked out, they moved to humans. trying to find a better genetic design for man to live in this new artificially created environment that will continue to exist after the solar transition. This gave rise to all the UFO stories about alien human hybrids. It was all just part of the genetic engineering that had to go hand in hand with the geoengineering. And he's got some footnotes here about this Arco Power Technology company, and they're the company that built HARP. And he just lists a few of their patents. 5,202,689 is the lightweight focusing reflector for space. 5,041,834 is the artificial ionospheric mirror composed of a plasma layer which can be tilted. Patent 4,999,637, creation of artificial ionization clouds above the Earth, and 4,873,928, nuclear-sized explosions without radiation. So if you'd like to look those up, give it a shot. Love to hear back from you. Okay, if you look at all the weird UFO stuff going on over the last 60 years, most of it was nothing more than steps toward the focus of creating an artificial world and artificial population to continue third density life on the Earth after the solar transition. And it was not just people. Long-term food sources had to be adjusted to remain viable in the artificial environment. And that's where your good friends at Monsanto came in with their drought-resistant, toxic, chemical-resistant GMO foods. Sure, experiment with the mass population to find the good strains for the people who deserve them. And make sure you have HIPAA and healthcare, in quotes, to get all that genetic data back to the computers to determine what worked and what didn't. After all, they're not collecting mountains of medical data, they're protecting your privacy. They are really quite happy now with their little artificial empire and are engaging in all the stalling tactics they can. The solar transition is already underway, and all they have to do is keep the masses distracted long enough for the good stuff to start so they can lock themselves away in their underground bases and let the rest of us burn. Or so they think. To quote Dr. Malcolm from Jurassic Park, life will find a way. Okay, that's the end of that section. The next section is called ELE and Ascension. And ELE is extinction level events. And we will take over with that section starting tomorrow. I appreciate you tuning in for today, and have a great night.